Welcome to episode 4 of the Arc-Aholics, an Arc Raiders-centered podcast where we discuss Embark Studios' upcoming game, Arc Raiders, as well as other extraction shooter-related topics. All content creator guests who appear on here will have their platforms linked in the description down below, and I highly encourage you checking them all out. Today's topics of discussion will be Arc Raiders' release date lining up with a lot of competition, and how the lore of the Arc Raiders can contribute to some possible in-game events and content. Feel free to leave us running in the background to do whatever you need to do, or enjoy the mid-game play. Hope you enjoy the show. Alright, my name is Gecko from the YouTube channel Gecko Frontier, and I will be your host for today's episode. Boxes unfortunately cannot be here today, as Tactical Ned didn't take kindly to his slander last episode, and caught up with him in the parking lot. Our first guest here is returning one. He's Luve from It's Luve YouTube channel. After being devastated after the Summer Games Fest, no doubt, consoling himself after making heavy mains in the finals cry, Luve, please tell us, how do those heavy tears taste?
You know, I drank so many heavy tears. I've been playing Flamethrower heavy this season. Loving every second of it.
Fantastic, you're a horrible human being. And our last guest is one of, if not the longest running Arc Raider content creator, Rockhoundblack. He's been hard at work uncovering Easter eggs in the finals. We want to thank him for once again gracing us with his presence. So, Mr. Rockhound, did you by chance uncover a secret countdown related to Arc Raiders hidden within the finals? Or do you hate us all and want to keep that information to yourself?
I definitely have not found a secret countdown to Arc Raiders in the finals. I can confirm that I have not found one.
So you have found one. Got it. All right. So starting off with today's episode, we have a couple of topics that we want to discuss here. The first one is I'm seeing some rumblings about and some concerns about Arc Raiders release date being centered in the middle of a lot of perceived competition. Now, I wanted to give your guys' takes on this, but first, I'd like to set the scene a little bit because there is a difference between what I think some people mean by competition. There's, the direct competitor, as in this game is basically within the same genre, basically taking the exact same people and targeting them, or just simply a matter of attention. Like, hey, there's a really big game that has come out around the same time that happenstance to draw a lot of the same overlapping players. So distinguishing between the two, do you feel like Arc Raiders should be concerned for its release window? We'll start off with Luve in this one.
I mean, Pokemon Legends ZA coming out October 16th, definitely a main competitor, definitely something to look out for. In all seriousness, though, end of the year, while I am devastated by the date of, having to wait that long, I think the people that are going to want to wait will wait. And I just hope that we can bring this hype and this marketing machine back up as we get closer to October. Because I feel like we were at such a high that the fall felt so long.
Interesting. What's your take on this, Rock?
Yeah, I think that the tech test was so well received. I'm kind of wondering if it's actually almost around the other way now, and that games that are releasing around Arc Raiders might be concerned.
Yeah.
Like the people are sold on the game. We might not have been completely sold on Embark Studios marketing around Summer Game Fest, but there's a lot of people sold on the game, and maybe they'll just go, well, I'm going to be playing Arc Raiders no matter what now, and I'm actually putting this game ahead of the others.
Interesting. So I think we can probably put games like the likely Call of Duty release, and we're not likely, we kind of confirmed that, and also likely Battlefield game being released around that time as the secondary competition in terms of like here they are on typically tens of millions of players being drawn to these games.
Same audience-ish.
Roughly same audience. There's a Venn diagram going on there that not absolutely the same audience, but enough of that it's going to make a dent into the Arc Raiders potential launch success. You don't feel like that's going to be a factor in setting aside any direct competitors? You don't feel like that right there will be it'll be kind of flipping in terms of like they'll see their numbers diminish as opposed to the other way around, Rock?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a great question because I came from Battlefield sort of background, I suppose. And if a good Battlefield came out, I'd be like, oh, do I want to play some of that and some of Arc Raiders? I mean, I'll be completely focused on Arc Raiders in a way, but it's really hard to tell what the core audience are that are just like, okay, I'm going to be playing Arc Raiders and I'm going to do like 5,000 hours in it kind of person, versus those that are like, oh, I hadn't really thought about this game and I was focused on Battlefield, but now I'm sitting on the fence. And how do we judge those numbers?
And that kind of happened during the Titanfall 2 release. Didn't Titanfall 2 line up with one of the big Call of Duties? And that's kind of why their player count was very shaky on the start, is because they went up against, the king. I think Call of Duty has fallen off a bunch. I know myself personally, this is probably gonna be the first Call of Duty I don't pick up. And I might dip my toes back into that Battlefield game, but I really worry about, just the amount of people, the console market specifically for Call of Duty. I think was that stat I shared a while ago that like something like 40% of PlayStation 5 owners have only played Call of Duty ever.
Right. And it's interesting because I feel like I have an opposite relationship to Call of Duty. I can count on one hand the amount of Call of Duties I've purchased in my lifetime, and I'd still have left to give you a one finger salute. And so, with a thumb to include it. And so, I have the opposite relationship. So, Call of Duties to me are kind of null and void. So, it's interesting to get your take on this. So, you've purchased it, generally speaking, if not completely accurate, every single Call of Duty up until this point, and this year is probably gonna be the first one you're going, you know what? Not this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'd say I fell off. I played, the originals, COD 4, Modern Warfare 2. Fell off for Advanced Warfare. Played a little bit of Black Ops, but when the first Modern Warfare 2019 remaster came out, I've bought every single Call of Duty up to right now, Black Ops 6, even though I purchased that and haven't played more than probably 10 hours of it, maybe a little bit of Warzone, but I probably will not be picking up this one. Yeah.
Right. And for me, I remember, I think all the way up until Battlefield 3, maybe a little bit of Battlefield 1, I was very much a big Battlefield individual. I played a lot of it, Bad Company 2, all of that. And at a certain point, it kind of just fell off for me. You could have just, attributed that to things in my life, but ultimately, I never saw a reason to come back. I saw plenty of people kind of just, feelers about, hey, this game isn't what it used to be. This franchise is not what it used to be. And based off of the sales and things like that, it kind of, tends to trend that way. So in a lot of ways for me, and based off of the numbers in terms of the players lost in the most recent Call of Duty title, I feel like AAA spacing, especially these two big titans, aren't exactly what they used to be. So I feel like there's probably a lot of fertile ground to do what Rock was saying in terms of someone just kind of swooping in and giving them opportunity to play something else.
On that same note, too, if we do think Marathon launches September 23rd, no postponement there, it'll be interesting to see what that 1 month does to people's idea of an extraction shooter. Are they going to go, again, if it releases, wow, this is a shit game, I don't want to play Arc Raiders? Or are they going to go, oh, this idea is interesting, but this game sucks? Or it's great, it might just suck up the whole audience.
Those outcomes can be surprising, right? You don't know. Like, if we look at the gaming industry as a whole at the moment, it's going through a period which is kind of struggling, right? There's people being laid off and throughout studios and so on, and it's hard to tell whether that means that people will focus on something fresh and new because it's like, this is actually really different from other games, and that becomes a draw card, or whether they go. It's like going home to mama, right? They go back to Call of Duty and go, well, I'm just going to stick with the game I know.
Right. And I think that brings us to the other type of competition, which is the more direct competition, right? Because Marathon could have the exact opposite effect in the sense that it gives a lot of people exposure to extractions, but maybe they do such a bad job of it that it just puts a bad taste in people's mouths that they don't even look at another extraction. And so that could be another effect as well, unknowingly. We don't know because, well, stranger things have happened in the last few months, let alone overall in gaming to predict. But there's another horse in the race, I think, a lot of people are either betting really heavily on or discounting completely, and that's Tarkov 1.0. The window for its quote release is set somewhere in that realm. Again, it's still kind of unknown. There's like a 3-month window type situation, right? And Tarkov is known to drum up a ton of players during a wipe, which is at the very least can be called that. But a 1.0 release adds other factors to this. That combined with Marathon, I think represents the biggest direct competitors. How do you see that fits into it? Let's go with Rock.
Do you think that I'm going to asking a question, but it is my answer, I suppose. Do you think that Tarkov has had so much access up to this point that people are kind of getting to the point where they're suffering Tarkov burnout, even if it is
100%.
at 1.0?
I'm gonna play devil's advocate on this one, in that Well, Tarkov has never been on Steam, so that's a big factor. There are plenty of people that are not aware of Tarkov, and so they may be getting their first exposure to Tarkov. And so I
Is it
think
coming to Steam?
at some point, yes, I believe it was saying that one. I don't think the 1.0 release will be it, but I think that's the goal, to bring it to Steam. I think that will be a game changer for them in a lot of ways, because people will have the readily available access to go, hey, you know what? This is a game I've never heard of. They have a marketing opportunity to reach an audience. So what do you think about that, Rock?
Yeah, yeah. It's something I hadn't actually considered that much before, because I kind of just figured that the Tarkov audience is kind of that already with the game, as opposed to people that are going to jump on it now. In some ways, that was how I viewed it in my mind. But maybe that's a wrong view of it, and that if it does come to Steam, then there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to look at it. The one difference being, in my view, is that Arc Raiders and Tarkov, I think, are separated enough, and I think Embark have done a really great job of narrowing down a niche that really wasn't taken, which was non-military, more casual gameplay, and console as well.
Yeah.
Adding console, it's one of the few console extraction shooters, or it's going to be one of the few.
Got it.
So
I really don't see Tarkov bringing in a substantial brand new player base. I don't know. I just don't see it. I can't explain why.
Okay. Well, for me, no longer playing devil's advocate, I'd be inclined to agree, and I think here's my reasoning. Right. Tarkov has existed for about close to a decade now. I think let's say before the Steam launch, I think people hearing about a 1.0 release, I think that will not bring people who already have not been exposed to Tarkov, right? I feel like
100%.
they are such a big game within this genre. If you weren't even remotely interested in this genre, you know about Tarkov. And if you know about Tarkov, you already have an opinion of Tarkov. Either you like it or you don't. Right. And so it's not, I don't think an issue is an exposure issue in terms of player growth. I think they've saturated pretty much the player cap of what they can get.
And
Yes,
as an
I'd agree.
example, so one of my gaming buddies, DeMeister, who runs the Discord that I kind of hang out in, he has just under 6,000 hours in Tarkov, and I've spoken to him a lot about both Arc Raiders and Tarkov, and he might correct me on this when he hears this, but from what I can tell, he's going to play a lot of Arc Raiders and not so much Tarkov, because he's kind of done Tarkov now, and he'll probably play 1.0 to check it out, but he is very much looking forward to playing Arc Raiders.
Yeah, so you're saying it might go the other way.
Could go the other way. Yeah, that's right. But I think they're separate enough. People that like that hardcore style of play, and it's not really me. Although I bought Tarkov and I played it. I wanted to play it with friends, but there's going to be a big audience of people who like the more casual gameplay that Arc Raiders presents, and just aren't into that hardcore aspect and high challenge that Tarkov brings with no map and all those kind of things.
And I think that's also one of the other points of contention in terms of whether or not it's going to bring in new players, because the kind of players that it attracts are the kind of players that are going to seek it out, right? Like, because it doesn't give you anything. That's one of the charms that people have about Tarkov, is like, it may not be for me, and I want to be very clear about anyone who's a fan of Tarkov that's listening. At no point am I saying it's a bad game. It's just not something that I particularly care for, but its popularity and its solid player base cannot be disputed. Right. However, it does attract a specific type of player in that it doesn't give you anything to work with. It makes you work very hard for everything that it gives you. Right. And so that's kind of its charm. With that being said, the kind of individual who's playing that kind of game won't have a hard time finding Tarkov. Right.
Yeah, and exactly. It's divisive, right? So, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It just divides the community, because either you're into that difficulty or you're not.
Right. It's
I also don't
deliberately
think Tarkov
exclusive.
is headed anywhere. Like, it's not like it's gonna, fall off the map. Tarkov's got some staying power for a while. I just don't see it having this generational explosion, personally.
Well, it kind of did. I think if it spawns a whole new genre, I think that is the legacy that it does, even if it lasts throughout the ages.
Yeah, no, it definitely, like, it's influence, but I just don't see Tarkov itself having this next, like, top of Steam charts, everyone playing. I think it's kind of found its audience.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
In that regard, I think if when it does finally come to Steam, I don't think it's going to be a massive explosion. It'll be an uptick for sure. I think it will be. It'll find a portion of the audience that maybe hasn't found yet. But given what I've said before, I think the audience has already found it. It doesn't really need to find the audience, and that's kind of one of its strengths. Like I think that's a big strength in the sense that it knows what it is. It wants to be what it is, and players will go out and find that, which is a beautiful thing. I think Arc Raiders aims to be a much broader attraction, and it's a very different game. And I think because it's doing that, it's the Venn diagram of people playing those two games doesn't overlap as much as I think some players think it is.
Yeah, perhaps you could say the analogy is that Tarkov is the armor of extraction shooters and Arc Raiders is the Call of Duty of extraction shooters. And I could be wrong with that, but to me, Arc Raiders seems way more accessible and potentially has a much larger audience than the niche that Tarkov has really established for itself.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree, and I think for anyone who wants to maybe sit on the opposite side of the issue with regards to Tarkov and its ability to like really threaten Arc Raiders launch, it's one of those things where I feel like if you're too close to something, you don't really see the way you don't see it for the way other people see it. I feel like if people who really love that game, they're not seeing it how other people see it, right? And so, and that's to me, I've consistent. I think I said it once on one of these podcasts is that I would never want Tarkov to change to attract me because it's not even guaranteed I even played anyways. So like, why would I want it to change away from what the people who are currently loving it would want it to be, for the sake of it attracting more players? Like even if it were to, I would propose this idea to a Tarkov player in this regard is that if Tarkov could become significantly more accessible and dilute itself significantly, but get 10 times the amount of players, would you want that?
No, it wouldn't attract me. In fact, I'm more attracted to it as it being a high difficulty military style.
Right, it would lose the very thing that makes it definitive. Yeah. Right, it would almost like it would kill both communities at that point. It wouldn't attract the people who would trying to attract, and it would drive away the community that it currently has. And so like I'll be first in line to defend the features that are on it that I don't care for myself, because like that's obviously what they want.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%.
All right. So other than that, we have a couple of direct competitors. We got Marathon, possibly again wilder things could happen in terms of them coming out and being explosive. Again, I think we all kind of laugh.
I'd be astonished if they don't delay. Like to me, seeing the difference between Marathon and Arc Raiders, I cannot fathom that Marathon can be launched in September and be successful, and that they can't go, hey, this isn't going to work, let's just add 12 months to it, no matter what the cost, and we can produce a great game in that time.
You know, it would be crazy if they pulled a fucking Conquered and they shut down.
I'd be sad, actually. I think the extraction shooter.
Oh, it'd be really sad, but like,
yeah, I think we'd all be sad.
Despite the rhetoric out there that there's so many extraction shooters, and we've been through that topic before, I think there is absolutely a place for a game like Marathon to be successful as an extraction shooter, but it isn't ready to fill its own shoes, right?
100%. I would love a more casual based one where I didn't have to think and be on a Tarkov like awareness. I'd love to hop in there and play some casual stuff. Like that space needs to exist.
Yeah.
And on that note, because it needs to exist, I think that's probably why Arc Raiders is going to do a lot better than even the hype I think that we saw in this summer. Because at the end of the day, it's not ready. It's not ready, right? And we kind of talked that to death last week. But interesting enough, like Rock, you said, people are probably still going to buy the game. They're still going to be hyped for the game. Ironically, though, is that I did have one comment saying that a player will in fact not be buying the game in October because of the countdown snafu that happened last week. I want your thoughts on that one. Let's start off with Luve.
I mean, I was pretty devastated when I heard that, but I think people like to showboat like that and, you know, protest in their own way. But I think if you were so devastated by the game being pushed, you're going to get it. Like if you had no stake in the game to the point where you're like, oh, I could not pick this up, I don't think you're devastated by that. I think it's a lot of showboating. again, like you said, if the game's not ready, the game's not ready. And also, if that one person is going to vote with their wallet, I think that's great for them to do. They should do that, but I don't think it's going to make a real. I don't think it's going to matter in the large scale of things. I think if they do their marketing right and they ramp up and they get an audience focused on it again, maybe start doing some ads that poke fun at Call of Duty, DMZ, Warzone, and they get that broad market out there, I think they'll find a market of people. The price tag is going to be a rough part. Definitely. I think people are kind of getting used to not paying for games, but I don't think that one person is going to matter too much. There are going to be some out there, but it's not going to be the majority.
And I kind of wonder, like, what's there for someone to say that, to go from a position where they've probably been going, this game is amazing, I can't wait to play it, I want to play it right now. Embark are making me think I'm going to get the opportunity to play it very soon, and then suddenly they don't have that opportunity. Firstly, how does that relate to a change in how good the game is? Like,
yeah, exactly.
That bad marketing does not equal bad game. And what are they trying to achieve by going, I'm not going to buy it? It's like they're actually just cutting off their nose to spite their face, right? They're allowing themselves to miss out on what should be an amazing game, simply because of a marketing mess up.
I think if people hold those kinds of standards, games will never win. Like, can you imagine, like, people are already up in arms, like, oh, this game doesn't have, crossplay, or this game requires an account on this platform, or this game has, XYZ options in, character creation, or this game has this kind of story arc. And it's like, well, you messed up on your one little marketing opportunity in this particular point 5 months ago, so I'm not buying it. It's like, dude, how many different ways does a game have to be perfect for someone to hold that standard? I thought it's kind of interesting that I'm like, you can't win if that's the case.
People always just love to complain. Like, I don't know how many friends, like, I have a core group of friends that like the finals, and I have some that don't like the finals. And the friends that don't like the finals, completely valid. Some people don't like movement, some people don't like, certain parts of it. But when they complain about the finals, like, oh, it doesn't have this from XYZ game, not this from XYZ game, I'm like, this is a free-to-play, fleshed out, beautiful shooter that fits in its own kind of space. Like, I don't know, people just want to hate for no reason, I guess. I do it sometimes also, to be honest.
I think you bring up an interesting point, actually, because kind of fiddling around with this idea as a possible topic for a video or some kind, but it's that I feel like people don't take the time to properly articulate why why they enjoy a game or why they don't enjoy a game. They don't articulate why. And I think that's super important to do, because it's going to save you a lot of grief. It's going to help you in terms of giving feedback for a different game. So, for example, there was the demo for Wildgate that occurred for Steam Next Fest. I think it's still going on, so if you want to check it out, by all means. It is very clearly marketed and put forth as a PvP-oriented game. It's basically a battle royale with ships.
That's the space one, right?
Correct. And yet, I can go on the subreddit right now, and there's someone asking, is there a way to win this game while, quote, minding your own business? Effectively asking a way to win the game not engaging in PvP. And it's just, the responses were kind of hilarious. It's like, dude, welcome to 2025, where someone jumps into a clearly PvP game and goes, yeah, I don't want a PvP. I think it's one of those, you're lacking the knowing of thyself, right? Like, if you know you don't like certain features or certain things about a game, it wasn't built for you, and it probably won't help to try to, like, change the essence of the game itself. Like we just talked about with Tarkov. Like, I know I don't like X, I don't like Y, I don't like Z. Therefore, it's a pretty strong indication I'm not going to like that game. But I'm not going to go to the forums. I'm not going to go anywhere else and be like, hey, you need to add this and change your game completely fundamentally to attract me. And so it's kind of the same thing when you say, well, it doesn't have XYZ features. Well, okay, well, that must be very important to you. So, hey, I really like games that do X, Y, Z. Therefore, I'm going to gravitate towards games, and not just say this game doesn't have it, I get to, like, shit on it.
Yep, and I agree with you on most things, and I feel like most people are kind of like that. But what I worry about is the console market, which I feel like are more, like, not in a bad way, but entrenched in what games they play and less likely to branch out. I don't know if it's because of, like, the hard drive space and installing, or it's just, like, a different mindset there that I really hope that somehow there's a marketing breakthrough on that end.
Yeah, I think it'll be money well spent in terms of marketing specifically on the console side of things for Arc Raiders.
If we think about the community and the state they're in at the moment, so I imagine this, what you described before, someone who's saying, I'm just not going to buy the game because of this marketing path that's being taken. And there'll be people that are going to go, well, I don't really care. I'm going to buy the game anyway. If we think of a hypothetical situation, let's imagine that the tech test 2 finished, and then that X post that was put out, which said something like the Rust Belt doesn't sleep for long, if that actually simply said, we will have a release date trailer coming very soon, and then there was no countdown Easter egg, and then at Summer Game Fest, there was a release date trailer with October 30, so just like they had said previously. What do you think the community's state would be right now?
No, just pure hype. If you came at it as an angle of you guys love what we've cooked so far, let us cook a little more, I think it would have been ecstatic.
I think they could have even added on to that by maybe showing glimpses of things to be added, like new map, new arc, like they did in the trailer, but like be a little more overt about it, like new weapons, like just be like, hey, you liked what we cooked so far, here's what we got in the oven. Wait till we finish, and you're gonna love it even more. Like I think you're right. I think they'll be even more ecstatic from that at that point because they set the bar low in terms of expectations, and then they over delivered, which is basically what they did for Tech Test 2. Like this came out of nowhere. Here's the basic thing, over deliver on a highly polished product, and everyone was ecstatic for it. Same thing in terms of announcements.
And then they could potentially sort of fill the gap between now and the end of October with behind the scenes, here's a new weapon that we're going to have in the game at release. Just continue to build up that hype, right?
Yeah,
sure.
but I feel like a lot of those behind the scenes and not tech stuff, but behind the scenes stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, that really only affects like really big fanboys. Like I don't think like that's going out to like the people who haven't heard about it or were kind of on the fence. You know what I mean?
It's for the choir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to just them spending a ton of money on specific marketing when it comes to the console genre, because I think with its wish list records on Steam, I think they've got the PC side of it pretty locked up. It's the console part that they really need to nail down, because while it may be harder to get into in theory, I think it also represents a much bigger pool, so they even get even a minor fraction of that pie, it'll be significant.
Do you think they need to be? Sorry, I've sort of started asking questions rather than answering them.
No, you're good.
Do you think they need to do a marketing playtest just for the sake of a marketing beat somewhere in between now and release? Or
You mean
or
like a beta?
Yeah, like an open beta. Like if they don't have one and they just have marketing build up only, versus they say at the start of August, say we're going to have a playtest, and it's really just an early access type of playtest to give you guys a taste of being back in the game, and really made it clear that it was a marketing beat playtest. Do you think they need that to be a successful game?
I think that was probably the most successful thing for the finals, if you remember that.
That was a free game though, so it's a little different, I think.
Yeah, but letting people get in there and play it, and letting all the streamers hop on it and play it in the open beta. I think for the finals itself, that's when people really heard about it.
I mean, I don't think, like, the question I'll ask is, of course, I think it will help, but will it have the possibility of hurting as well? Because it's not the same kind of game. There's like the content pipeline that they need to go through. So having people experience that, and then like kind of working their way through it, so when they finally get to it again, they'll just bust through it even faster, or like be less excited about going through those missions again. Like I'm not entirely convinced that's the case, but I'm just saying, like, maybe that's a possibility in terms of like, well, they have something to gain, but what do they have to lose to go along with it? Is it worth it?
Is the hype greater than eating the cake?
Yeah, I'm kind of starting to lean towards the idea of not having a playtest maybe, and actually just have some downtime where everyone can sort of calm down after what happened.
Yeah, pitchforks down, everybody. Pitchforks down. Rockhound is just throwing it out there as a possibility.
I agree.
Yeah, and to not give away any more content as well, because we've seen a taste of it, maybe 20% or something like that of what's going to be in the game.
I think if it like they narrow it down to like an event style, like, hey, this is 2 days, and like I said before, what the possibility, like, hey, only people who've gotten access to it before will have access to it readily, but they have like, 2 or even maybe 4 keys each person. So like everyone, their mother who's on the hype train wants so badly to get their buddies in on it that they'll like, it'll bring up even higher. And so
Yeah.
like some kind of narrowly focused, tailored event that is designed to be the marketing push. It has no relevance to testing or any of that, which I don't think it's Embark style, but I think that could be the best way they can implement that.
And let me bounce off of that. Kind of a trend recently, which I don't think I like it at all. We saw it with Call of Duty, we saw it with Starfield, is the purchase the Grandmaster Edition to get in 2 to 3 days early.
Yeah, if they have an early access version of the game, I'll be highly disappointed. I'll be perfectly honest, because I'm kind of tired of that trend. I won't be shocked. I'll be disappointed, but I won't be shocked. What about you, Rock?
I think if it's a short period, I'm fine with there being like an Ultimate Edition and you get in 2 days early. 2 days is nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it's not like a
Yeah.
Dune Awakening where like you have those sustainable, building materials and things like that. Like, sure, yeah, you'll have a head start in a game where that kind of does matter a little bit, but it's not as definitive as it is in like a survival type game. So we're here at the halfway point of the hour, and so now seems like a good time to kind of shift gears a little bit away from the whole marketing and business side of things and more into the lore aspect of the game. Now, Rocky had a really fantastic video that we got a chance to see and get a lot of information in regards to the lore of Arc Raiders. And
Thank you.
it was very well done. I got a lot of information in terms of the possibilities of what it was. A couple of key things to take away that I think that can help start this conversation is that I caught very early on that it was not a typical man versus the machine situation, in the form of the machines were the ones that caused the post-apocalyptic situation. I caught very early on they were very specific. Embark was very specific by saying an environmental disaster. So that led me to believe there was a scenario in which Arc happened to show up afterwards, not necessarily as a cause of, but rather it's a side effect of, hey, humans are not longer here, or something else that happened. And so there's a situation in which the Arcs are not the omnipotent type of enemies that you typically see in these kind of genres, a la Matrix, a la, Terminator, all that kind of good jazz.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Like, we know, based on the technology you see around the maps, kind of Soviet era, a lot of it. So maybe the environmental collapse happened sometimes around late 70s, maybe into the early 2000s. Then there was an exodus off the planet, and then we know pretty much about 100 years after that is when Arc first turned up, because Celeste experienced the first Arc wave.
Right. So there was a good amount of period of time between when it was, quote, post-apocalyptic and when they were actually fighting Arc. The one thing I would actually kind of push back on, or maybe throw out that possibility, is that it isn't necessarily the 70s style when the technology was kind of, when it was there at its peak. That could just simply be an aesthetic thing. Like, it could have very well been, we kind of stuck with this aesthetic, and so, it could have, the breakdown could have happened much later. We just kind of kept the aesthetic.
Yeah, it could have happened later.
There's the retro futures.
We know that the Exodus period is mentioned in the game as being from like a time ago. So when people were leaving the planet wasn't around the time when the first Arc wave turned up. It's we're given the impression that it was several decades at least prior to that.
Right, but before humans left, the synths were around, though, the synthetic, droids and whatnot. So it'd be interesting to kind of see what kind of role they played in the society prior to, the situation that it is now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like Lance's ancestors. What was their role? We see a couple of them, I think, lying around on the spaceport map. But what were those droids used for? Were they military droids? Were they just serving food? What was the purpose of them?
Right. Depending on how advanced the technology was for that, I think, there's room for being the serf class, essentially replacing people in terms of, like, their ability to do manual labor and tasks and whatnot. But depending on how advanced that is. But to me, I feel like there's a lot of potential for content and events, because there exists a very real possibility that there are humans in orbit, not necessarily in direct control of the Ark, but at the very least, they're the ones kind of pulling the strings and giving the orders.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And I feel
exactly.
like there's a lot
what
of.
else? I was just going to throw this out there, but I tell you what else it could potentially set up for, and this is kind of a hope of mine in a way, is that we could actually have a prequel game put out down the track, which is the dystopian period before Ark and after the Exodus, as a kind of like DayZ competitor, like open world, just people roaming around and that persistent server kind of style. It's a possibility.
I can't even get in the game, and Rockcon's already talking about the next one.
You're
Yeah,
right.
sorry.
Honestly, it might be a really good PvE version of the game, right? If they created like a single player or even co-op campaign of missions, not necessarily of that, but of the exodus of the actual planet, of just like dealing with synths, dealing with any of the turmoil that may or may not have been going on during that time. There's a lot of rich story that you can create in that regard in terms of creating a PvE experience that you can add onto the game. So you can kind of go in that route as well.
Yeah, and don't get me, I might be wrong, but there's been hints that this is in the same universe as the finals, also, correct?
So this is an interesting subject. So at this stage, I think you can safely say there's no definitive evidence to say whether Arc Raiders and the finals are in the same universe. There are things that appear in both games, but there's no definitive way to tell if they're just Easter eggs as a nod to the other game, or if they actually have some sort of lore relationship. My personal take is that they are not related, and I prefer it that they're kept separate as narratives. But I know that there's other people that like the idea of them being crossed over as well. But I think we can't really say for sure at this stage.
Gotcha. Sorry, side note there.
No, I think that's going to be a valid question and valid thing that people are going to talk about. Give your thoughts in the comments, gentlemen. And so here's another one to put forth now the idea. So there clearly is a class of people that made it off the planet and had the resources and all that stuff, right? Like me personally, I feel like it would be a very lazy route to go of this high on robber baron, us versus them type of scenario, right? Whereas they'll have primarily their surf classes being entirely of droids, for example. But I think it would be a lot more interesting if they brought a lot of people, but they chose to exclude some because it simply couldn't fit them all, right? They couldn't do it. They didn't have the resources for it. And so people were pissed because obviously, no one wants to be left behind, right? And so I think it would make a much more interesting scenario where if there's a Speranza and there's factions within Speranza for their own particular reasons, but then you have the Arc humans, the humans in orbit, they may have their own particular factions. And you can easily see a scenario where like, you know what? We're going to finally make our way down to Earth because clearly there's people living here, or maybe they don't even know people are living down there. Only the higher-ups know people are living down there. You can have like a Forerunner type situation where only the higher-ups know that there's people still down there. And then you have the other parts of humanity that's up there going, okay, we survived. We're the only survivors of humanity. And they realize, no, they're not. So the Earth is livable. And so they come down, and that could be in a whole other region of the world that could be explored, via the same kind of like gameplay loop. But only you have new factions, you have new traders, new weapons even, and you just kind of like can expand the game from there. I feel like that's a much more interesting lore tree or lore, path than it is the typical us versus the elite type situation. I think that's kind of boring, honestly.
Yeah, there is something to point towards to that though, which is there's graffiti on the Buried City map near the highway spawn, which says in Italian, "Only the rich leave this shit."
Mm-hmm.
So potentially some sort of wealth-based aspect to it
Oh,
there.
for sure. But I think it comes down to like who is actually going to have the resources to actually build everything that would take to go up there. Obviously, right? It's going to come down to that. But in terms of like, that's what I was talking about in terms of the role that these droids played. If they essentially replaced manual labor in all intents and purposes, then yes, I can see it can be exclusively just the most privileged of society. We're talking like an Elysium. If anyone's watched the movie Matt Damon, the Elysium type situation where you have just them up there. But if they
Yeah.
didn't replace humanity's manual labor, working class completely, then I can see kind of more of my wanting of that particular story kind of being more possible.
And the droids could have been created purely out of necessity. Like if you have during the Exodus, if you're trying to get billions of people off the planet within a decade or two, perhaps maybe they needed to have them to actually complete that task in a timely manner.
Yeah, or like,
And then maybe also there is like a side of where they aren't the bad guys. Like think of the first half of the movie iRobot before it goes to shit, right? They could just be like a companion type system within that universe.
Yeah, and Lance's personality would certainly sort of back that up if he's any sort of take on what they were like previously, then maybe they were just sort of semi-intelligent with a bit of personality and really helpful workers, and not there was no sort of antagonistic aspect to them.
Right, or even just to flip the script entirely, it could be the ones that were left behind were not necessarily just the poor or what have you. It could have been like, you know what, we just didn't want to bring the people who are actively shooting and creating unrest. And it's like, they weren't exactly the good guys in the situation either. So it's kind of like, I feel like if you create more of a gray on both sides of the equation, you'll have much more, much more interesting storylines to tell.
Yeah, for sure. I guess one question I have is if the people that have left the planet, let's assume for the moment they're still around, like orbiting Earth or something like that, then if they don't know that there are people still down there, why are Arc there? And that's assuming that they've made Arc, but Arc might not have been made by those people that are orbiting Earth. They could be a completely separate thing.
I think
but if they are, then what's the purpose of Arc?
Right. I think
I
think the way harvesters work kind of imply that they in fact are, essentially employing Arc. However they are controlling them is not, we don't know, but like they're sending supplies up normal, up to orbit, and I think it's much more plausible that higher ups, like the people who are in charge, know that that people are down there, versus if there are a lower caste of people up there, it'd be more possible for them not to know it than it is for them to like know it and be okay with the Arc situation. Maybe not, I don't know, but it's just one of those things where like if there exists a situation where the people in the Arc in orbit know, which I think it's the case. I think it's one of those cases. Well, they're getting supplies back and forth. They've got to get some kind of information from the Arcs that are down there and saying, hey, we're fighting people actively who are trying to impede our ability to send you supplies. So obviously we're using lethal force. Whereas like, there's a lot of things that can go on there. But I think for sure, at least in my mind, that there's definitely people up there still, or maybe they've already died and perished for whatever particular reason. And then the Arcs are kind of on autopilot.
Yeah.
I definitely think it's a resource thing where people are of a higher class and they simply need resources, right? Like as people do. While the Earth may be, falling apart in the atmosphere, might be bad to leave, there's still resources on the Earth that are needed to run the ship, maintain the ship, fix parts, fix technology. And I very much see it as almost commentary of kind of how countries have done that to other more impoverished countries in our world right now. Like you see like strip mining for lithium in Africa and stuff like that. I kind of see it as there are people up there. They know people are down there. They just don't give a shit. Again, all inference on my part.
I mean,
that sounds like perfectly, that could be exactly how it is.
Right. And then you can see a situation because they've been up there for, in theory, how long now, Rock? It escapes me, like 100 years, you say?
It's probably around, at a guess, about 130 years or thereabouts, maybe slightly less than that, 120.
Okay, so enough to basically you have about 2.5 generations or so of people. So long enough to where the people who originally went up probably aren't around anymore, but the people who were born from them are, and so they have a degree of memory to go along with that. The reason why I bring that, because there's a couple of different sci-fi IPs that kind of talk about this multi-generational, people in space away from their initial homeland, right? If you've ever watched the very crappy show The 100, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so in this particular case is that humanity lives over the Earth in this, space station essentially, and it becomes such a very resource, tight situation where like any crime becomes capital punishment worthy essentially. And I feel like I'm not sure if it's been long enough, honestly, to create a situation where they would deliberately send people down, other than arcs to do something, right? And so I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like
So okay, here's just based on that. Here's an interesting concept. So we know right now in the finals, and this isn't about the narrative, but that like Embark are essentially creating bots that we can have sparring sessions against, right? Which are a stepping stone to having full bot matches if we want them. Okay. So the Embark did say that during the preview event for the finals season 7 that their goal is to have full bot matches available. So if Arc Raiders down the track added in humans coming down and fighting against us, do you think that would be a good thing for the game?
Go ahead, Luve. If that's directed towards me or just in general.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I think scavs are good for Tarkov, right? And I think you'd be pressed to find someone that doesn't have that opinion. And I think it'd be an interesting dynamic of, maybe not all of them are bad. Maybe there's an outpost now that you can go to, kind of like a gray zone town that you could do trade with, that you're kind of neutral with, and you open up a whole world of like, yeah, you could just have a guy come down who's not as powerful as an Arc, who's a guy on feet with maybe like, I don't know, like a Halo suit, or
He's in a mech maybe.
yeah, and maybe something like not as strong as an Arc, but not a little bit stronger than you. That's like a mid thing, like a scav. But I also see the other side too of like, maybe there's a group of people that escaped because up there's actually a hellscape and now they're setting up, or maybe you can barter with this guy, or maybe you can negotiate with him. I think there'd be a whole crazy level of PvE stuff, trading RPG elements that could also come with that. I don't see how that could be a bad thing. I think you could expand it in many different ways.
Right.
It certainly opens up a lot of possibilities for the game down the track.
Yeah. I'm not a fan personally of having human bot targets in Arc Raiders. I think one of the biggest charms of the Arc Raiders that it has, the same thing for like the Cycle Frontier, is that the enemies are decisively not human. Right. And so it's not difficult. Also from a gameplay design perspective, that's a huge boost because like there's no question whether or not that's a player you're running into. And I feel like, and there's also another gameplay element to it, is that there's decidedly different tactics that you use for players that you use for arcs, not because that they're inferior in terms of their ability to fight you. It's just that they simply are different in terms of the dangers that they bring to the table. And
it might take the charm of the game away, right? If we fill in the gap between other players and Arc, that sort of dilutes their separation that they have already.
Right, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't do the same thing in terms of a story perspective, because if they are in fact the ones controlling Arc, right, or if it's a hellscape, they're coming down, they could be in a bunker. They could, cool, we have all this information on Earth, so we know where all the good bunkers in place are at. So we'll go down there and they will like communicate with Speranza or you via either communication via electronics, or it's an actual like in-game place that you have to go to, like a gray zone, like Lou was saying, and have an expanded like content loop in terms of getting there, getting and kind of trading with them, but you don't actually see them because they're behind closed doors. But essentially you're trading with them to get that story content, but they still control like the arcs that they have available to them, because like even if it's they escape, quote unquote, they escape with some knowledge, and so you can kind of go with that in terms of the kind of arcs that they bring to the table. It could be like, hey, I want to fight these guys, and they don't have access to the regular arcs, so they came down, they took all that information and built new arcs, and so you go to this whole new area that has entirely different arcs that are maybe less refined, but like bring their own threats.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a type of guy who like goes off the deep end with theorizing, but you can even open up a thing of like a quest line where now you're going up to their ship, kind of like a marathon thing. It's very much like thought that we're going to go to the marathon ship in that game. You could do something like that in Arc Raiders, where we find old parts, you get together and we launch ourselves up and, raid that area. That could be the end game.
Oh, for sure. And I think also it would give an opportunity for a new map type environment. Like it could be a situation where they went up, they have their space stations, right? But they have multiple space stations, so it's not just the main one. It can be like, cool, we're gonna raid this place, and it's an entirely indoor, you know, much more tight, like just obviously like abandoned or destroyed, you know, station, but it has like maybe arcs that like malfunctioned or whatever, right? You can go wild with that. Inadvertently, on the other side, you can create the exact same kind of map, but only underground. It can be like, cool, we have this underground area that the arcs kind of busted through, and this is like an old. You can take it even further. It can be like an old colony, like a Speranza, but like before Speranza. Like
I agree with you that
maybe
I don't want boots on the ground right away unless they figure out a way to make it feel different. But I would say don't cut that out because the story implications of that for the lore could just open up so much.
And I think the going into space thing, you could in a way bring in, say, fights against droids up there, so they are very bot-like, like Lance-like, but so it's sort of an intermediate step between having actual AI humans that you're fighting against. But you could go up to a space orbiter, fight against Arc and droids up there, but it's the only place that you see droids.
Yeah, I think so long as the difference is obvious, like it's like very
Yeah,
because I think
exactly.
one of the complaints I've seen in other games for extraction shooters is that they input bots in basically disguise them as players, right? And it's I don't have that big of an issue with it, but at the same time, it's really annoying to like try to figure out, especially when trying to use sound and whatnot, to figure out if that's a player, if it's not, and if it's they don't look that different from the bots. It's, you know, depending on what, especially if you try to make them look exactly like players, and then you kind of just you see them and you just like, all right, I'm gonna go all in on them. I'm gonna fight them like they're players, and like literally mid magazine through, you're like, oh, this is a bot.
Yep.
And I feel like that's not a good feeling. I don't think Arc Raiders should.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to, I think.
Especially in a PvP game, you just don't want to be fooled by, you want to know the difference, right?
Right, and you'll know the difference.
Between
That's not the thing. You'll know the difference. Is that you won't know it until after the satisfaction, to the point where you feel like you got fooled.
Yeah, but that's what I mean is you want to know the difference up front.
Right.
Yeah, you there should be a visual indicator or something.
Yeah, and if it looks
Like
looks
when
like
I'm fighting it in Arc, I
then
know it's not a person.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Arc makes perfect sense, and then if it looked like Lance, pretty easy to tell that you're fighting a bot, right?
Right. Especially if they do something different in terms of their movement and their sounds and their weaponry. Like it's very distinguishable. There is no difference, right? And I feel like this was brought up actually on the subreddit, and I was thinking about this idea as well. Like you can probably even use that as a trap. You can create like a bot that's like a synth, and you can go, cool, I'm gonna put that in a really dark area, and be like, I'm gonna start echoing and making random noises that people would make, and then use that as basically like an evolution of content for arcs. Going, hey, we found ways to be sneaky, so we're gonna go ahead and like be like the T2 Terminator, where like you're trying to make as much as close as possible to then ambush you in areas that you didn't think had arc in them.
Wouldn't that be a great way of Embark kind of introducing it? That you go into a bunker and there's one of those droids, kind of, half bodies lying there, and then it suddenly like activates and starts shooting at you just enough to like scare the hell out of you, and then everyone's going like, okay, we've got this whole new thing, but it's not we're not given a whole bunch of bot players to fight against straight away. You're just given this little narrative element of, okay, these droids are actually a thing. Where does it go from here?
Yeah, the implications on that one alone is good.
I think keeping it vague also and keeping you thinking about it, what the fuck was that, is way better than being like, exactly. I came down from the ship.
Yeah, freaking everyone out in the entire community that there's this bot that suddenly is, or droid that's suddenly active, that they were never a thing before, apart from Lance.
Yeah.
I think it would be a neat little narrative.
For sure. And I think you could litter like a map or a new map or an area, like, okay, you have a new patch, you're going to have these guys around, right? And just be random, whether or not they're still active or not. So you just don't know. And that makes it even more tense in the sense that you pass by, you see a droid, and you're like, oh wait, okay, cool, it's dead. And then like it actually is dead. Then the next one, you're like, oh, it's dead. Okay, cool. And then like 2 seconds later, shoots you in the back.
Yeah, so when you see one, you actually start shooting at it, which gives away your location as well, right? So there's a whole psychological thing that comes into it.
right? Or you can go right up to it and just be like, cool, I'm gonna cut some wires and make sure you're completely like dead, and do it quietly. But it takes a long time to do or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Like it would be like a looting animation, but you could like check the power while looting it.
Right. There's a lot. There's a
I think
lot
fun.
that I think Arc Raiders has set up for a content pipeline that is very lore rich, and I think that's probably
Yeah.
not a lot of extraction shooters have gotten to that point. I think a lot of extraction shooters, they'll have like a lore base, but they for whatever reason have failed from the mechanics point of view. It seems like Arc Raiders has a very strong mechanics and very strong gameplay, and now it has this backdrop of lore that it can really just tap into at will.
Yeah, and we've only got a taste of it so far. I think they would have held back a lot of that for sure during the tech test.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so, and I think so too. I think it's one of those things where I think logically speaking, based off everything I've seen Embark do, it's the most sound theory in that they deliberately held back a lot from us, because that's also the best way of going about it. Because like if they legitimately had 4, 5, however many maps available, however many weapons available, however many content windows available, it does not make it smart for them to make it all available during a test when people can just simply just
totally.
burn right through it.
Exactly. I agree.
All right. Well, we're at the 56-minute mark. I feel like this is a great time for us to call it from here. I want to thank everybody for showing up, the guests here today. I myself, if you haven't, for anyone listening still at this point, if you haven't checked out these guys' channel, please by all means take these guys' channel out. They make some great content. I'll let you guys say your guys' own goodbye. We'll start off with Luve. Go for it.
Thanks again, guys. I'm just really excited about this game, and check out my YouTube at It's Luve. I might come out with a video this month.
Maybe, who knows? And then Rockhoundblack, the man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And we always have such thought-provoking conversations. I really enjoy those as well. And if you want to check me out, I'm on YouTube, just Rockhoundblack. And I'm also live streaming from time to time as well. This week I've done a few Easter egg live streams, but a lot of the time I'm playing the finals while I wait for Arc Raiders.
All right, guys, check them out on YouTube and everywhere else. It's linked in the description. Peace.